All right. I
All
think
right.
we're ready now.
I think so. Cool. Um, yeah, so before we jump in, Ray's going to start us with the demos, but I think there were just two things that we wanted to discuss that I don't want to get forgotten. So first thing that we mentioned in office hours, that I know not everyone was there, so wanted to bring it to the whole group. There is an option on GitHub to add protections to branches, so that you can't accidentally merge to main before it's ready. I think it sounded like that was something that'd be interesting, like that we would be interested in as a team, but wanted to get a check. Are we cool with that option? Um, Basically, what that'll do is it'll make it so that you have to open a PR. You can't just directly commit to main, and it has to get like approved or whatever. So it's just like an extra layer of protection to make sure we don't accidentally like break our app, which isn't the end of the world. But anyone have any concerns about that? Cool. All
Just a
right,
quick
then.
question, if that's all
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I was just sort of curious. It's sort of a lot of like production or like sort of enterprise level things will probably have protections like this in it, right? Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Um,
So it's a good habit to have, I think. Just if there's a way of automating something to prevent human error, then that's helpful. Yeah. So again, like this is a safe project that we're working on as a team. So if we were to break production, it's not the end of the world. But yeah, just like a nice little extra security blanket. Yeah, I agree, Shane. It's good to see it in practice just to get some um, familiarity with that. So cool. The mentors will go ahead and set that up after our call at some point. But and then the other thing we were going to discuss is office hours. This past week we did like a scheduling poll to see what time worked best for everyone. One idea that actually Lewis had is we can, if we wanted to as a team, just like pick a time every week that just like works for everyone and we can just like have a recurring time instead of having to schedule every week, and wanted to see, I don't know what everyone's week looks like, if it's relatively like consistent schedule every week or if your schedules are kind of a little bit more fluctuating. Like, discuss, how do we feel about that idea? Would we prefer the option of like a recurring time every week, or would we prefer the option of scheduling it week by week?
I think I personally would prefer to schedule it every week. My schedule is like a little all over the place, so I never know when I'm gonna be scheduled. So I'd like prefer to do it week by
Yeah,
week.
fair. Yeah, totally fair. Shane, did you have anything else to add?
yeah, I was gonna chime in with a similar sort of comment where for me, my schedule's changing a little bit over the next couple of weeks, and I don't know exactly how. So for me personally, I would kind of like a flexible office hours that we pick every week, but if I have to miss a couple, I can do async questions and stuff like that too.
Sure, yeah.
Same for
Yeah, I
me.
think,
I'm okay with async.
okay. Anyone else have any preferences?
No, I was gonna chime in the same. Like my schedule is kind of a little nutty over the next 3 weeks or so, and so things just kind of keep popping on and off, and probably a little flexibility or async is absolutely fine.
Okay. It sounds like the majority of us are feeling like week to week, so we can continue going with that option. In that case, that's totally that works for us as well. So Lewis is going to be hosting office hours this week, so he'll be reaching out to everyone about the timing of that for this week. Um, cool. All right, so now that that housekeeping is out of the way, I'm going to pass it over to Ray, and we're going to start with our demos. Very excited for our first demos.
All
But it's
right.
okay that if they're going to be a little short, don't worry. No pressure.
Yeah, it should be short today, I guess. Okay. So I think we can start from the first issue, I believe. Any anyone? So Shane and Emily, do you want to start first for demoing the first issue?
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't know if do we want to demo the production app first or do the code first?
Let's do the demo first, and then I can talk
Okay.
about like how we got to it on our end of it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I will share my screen then. Uh, Okay, is that showing up for everybody?
Yep.
Okay. So here we have our app, of course. And so our goal was to be able to show or display the list that a logged in user has access to. And then also when they select a certain list, to display the items that are on that list. So we're logged out right now. So the first step would be to log in to get access to our lists. And we're logging in. There we go. So here we have one list that we have access to, the dinner list. And right now, we need to click on it in order to save or to select that list, so the app knows which list we're interested in getting the items for. And then we can go to the list page, and then the list page shows the items from the list of interest. So
Cool. Nice.
and I think, yeah, that's it for this issue.
And I'll pull up my VS Code. Let me share my screen. Let's see here. Yeah, we ran into some troubleshooting throughout the process. There we go. Pull that up and then share this side. The long and short of it was that we found that when we were trying to access our Firebase info, it wasn't quite in the shape that we expected, so to speak. But let me walk you through that. So in fact, I'll show you the components themselves. Let's see here. Sorry, one moment. There we go. List. So each individual list is taking the data prop that's being passed into it on that screen, on that route, so to speak. We're mapping through it, and then we're using the item itself and then its index or its place in that array is what it comes down as. And then we needed to set a unique key for each component that's being rendered as it's being mapped through. To my understanding, let's see here. Can you see my screen all right? I'm sorry.
Yep,
Cool.
we're good.
Cool. So as we're mapping through the data in React, my understanding is that React needs sort of a unique key in order for it to render those components properly. And so we didn't have this key property initially for list item, but we added it after we saw an error in the console, essentially. It just tells you explicitly each component needs a unique key in order for you to map through it properly. And then we use the item.id and to render the name of it. Let's see here. Sorry. And then that ends up being, so each of these list items, egg and milk, is essentially what is being returned from this right here. And then single list, let's see here. Was it an app? There's one more. Trying to find, where did we put okay, so we've got home, go back to home. Sorry, got a little bit lost. All right, and then single list is where like the coding we did to render the dinner list by name back on home. Oh, while we were doing this, we were just navigating using like /list because our buttons didn't work on the bottom when we were working through it initially. So this dinner list is being rendered with this function right here, which is us mapping through that data that's being passed into home from, kind of above. And I can show you where that's coming in. Again, we needed that unique key. The name and the path, these are all important for this single list component because we're going to use this, let's see here. We're going to end up using the set list path. I believe that's when we're kind of loading this data into local storage, I believe, like, on our browser, so that when we click to the list page, it actually renders according to that list path, sort of a thing. And then what was I doing? Let me show you the console logging that we did to troubleshoot our way. Essentially let's see here, app home, this data of lists itself was coming in kind of odd for us initially. So this is as we came into it, what we were looking at. But the problem we were having was once we actually tried to access that data, we weren't able to use the properties such as, from this data right here in home. This didn't come through in the shape that we were expecting. So when we tried to render using it, we were getting errors, nothing was showing up sort of a thing. So we ended up going back to, we sort of took, okay, back from home, looking back at layout. Let's see here. Oh, I'm sorry, it's an app. So back from app, we looked at, okay, where's home getting lists? Here's lists on line 37 of app. So we have this use shopping lists hook from elsewhere. Line 7, we're importing it from the API. So we just kind of traced it all the way back to like, where is this data coming from? Why is it weird? And then once we found, so in API, it all kind of gets collected and indexed, but then you can kind of like spread out and find, I think it's Firebase itself. Let's see here. It's one of these. It's either Firebase or it is use off. Okay, yeah, it's Firebase itself. And then we're looking for use shopping lists. I think that was the name of it. Yeah, there we go. So on line 21 of Firebase, this is where we started looking at this right here in this use effect, this use docref. This seems to be where the real like nitty gritty data access is happening, because it's looking at this snapshot. It's using on snapshot to look at like the Firebase database in that moment. And then it's taking all of that shared, it's getting the, from the shared lists, I guess the key in Firebase it would be. And what we're doing is we're returning this right here, name and path. But what we ended up doing was we ended up console logging just everything inside this use shopping lists. So it was like user ID, user email up here, we had the console log for to make sure that when we author it, when we hit the button to sign in, we know what we're actually sending to Firebase or what we're trying to look it up by. And then in this user docref, I believe we pretty much, we console logged the list refs, and we console logged the new data. Oh, I'm sorry, we console logged this list ref within here. So when we did that, we ended up seeing that those were coming in. We were getting some details from like 35 to 37, or some of the data was still there. But as soon as we tried to access it with an ID or path, that's when it started returning undefined from this function. It was like we had data within here, but then we did not have data on the way out. And we console log like the exit of it, sort of a thing. This is a really long-winded explanation. I apologize for that. But all this to say, we pretty much just console logged like crazy in here. And then on the other side, which happens to be, if you go back to app, and then we would log essentially lists itself, and then within home, what is data coming out as? And we kept on seeing it was undefined on those, like, as we're actually trying to access it within those components. Any questions and stuff like that? I'm sorry for rambling so much.
Well, I just want to say it's like really nice to talk everything through one by one, which is very nice because I had like experience. I got an interview and then I need to talk through all the code again. So it's kind of like difficult, but you did a great job actually. And yeah, I don't really have any question. Maybe Kathleen or Luis, do you have any specific question to ask?
Well, one thing we should probably keep track of is how long did you think you feel you spent this week on your issue? Do you think you went over the expected 6 hours, or do you think you kind of met that expectation?
I think it was still very much within the 6 hours. I think it was we had sort of an unproductive, well, I don't want to even call it an unproductive struggle. We met twice, Tuesday and Wednesday, for about an hour, but we found that we sort of knew what the problem was by, was it Monday or Tuesday? I can't remember, but we met 2 days in a row, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And we sort of got a feel for what the problem might be within 30 minutes, but we sort of like kept poking at it for a while to make sure. But I think, yeah, we probably spent like 2.5 hours this week on this particular problem.
Oh, that's good.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I would have assumed if it were me, I feel like it would have been longer trying to figure it out by myself. So that's awesome. Yeah, I don't think I have any questions you didn't already answer. I was curious to hear about your debugging process, so I love that you walked us through that. That was, I think, really helpful to see.
Cool. Yeah, I don't have any question either. So should we move next to the second issue? So Andrea and Davina, you can start.
Sure, I can walk us through what is currently in production. So give me just a second. For our, oh, hold on. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So for our issue, we were tasked with being able to have a user navigate amongst all the pages in the application through the links in the nav bar at the bottom. So when you go on the home page, bottom here is the nav bar, and you can access these when you are, oh, I think my cache still has everything in it, sorry. Okay. It'll eventually load up again, maybe. So the idea is that you can access both when you are logged in and logged out. Like so, it'll show up. And then when you sign in, when you go to home, you can see that it's the home page. You click on the list, it takes you to the list page, manage list, it takes you to the manage list page. So that's our issue in production. I'm going to stop sharing now. And Davina, if you'd like to go ahead with the code.
Yeah, so I will go ahead and share my screen with you guys and go over what coding changes we made. So ours was a lot more straightforward than what Emily and Shane had to go through in order to just make sure that those links were working correctly. We went into the layout page here, and so originally these nav links were using the A element to link to these different pages, home, list, and managed list. And so what we ended up doing was we imported navlink from React Router, and then we changed those A elements to the navlink, and then just used the same class names that were already in place for the original A elements, and then just changed it to the correct syntax for navlink. And then we used the same paths that were from the app, or maybe it was the app. We just copied the paths that were listed here in the routes and implemented those in the nav links. And yeah, any questions?
Maybe I have a quick question. How do you guys familiar with the React router?
How what?
How do you familiar with the React router?
So I've used React Router before, so I've used the navlink components before. I think maybe Andrea was like her first time using navlink, but
The docs are pretty helpful.
Yeah.
So I went through the docs and I read that, and it was pretty straightforward to be able to implement it in the actual code.
Cool.
Yes.
Any other question from Luis and Caitlin?
Happy to hear you're reading the docs. Seems obvious, but a lot of people, myself included, like struggle without looking at the docs. So kudos.
I have one question. I don't know if this was in the actual issue, but the other team created the buttons to go to the list page, but they didn't actually link to it. Was that supposed to be in this too, or is that something in a separate issue?
What do you mean, like the?
The previous, so the issue number 2
Mhm.
was on the homepage. They created the list of lists and they had buttons, but they said they couldn't navigate to them because they
Gotcha.
had to. I was wondering if that was in this issue or is that a separate issue? I don't actually remember seeing that in the issue list.
I think it was a separate issue. Ours just specifically said to change the navigation bar links for home listing
Okay.
managed list. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I will say great job everyone for demoing everything. And yeah, I think I will pass again to Kathleen for this demo.
Sorry, I'm just gonna interrupt here.
Yep.
I see that Shane had a question about the
Oh,
differences between navlink and the anchor tag. And so in the docs, what I read was kind of interesting is that the navlink is essentially like a special version of the link component. And what's really nice about it is that it includes some classes that are added automatically. So things like active, which is added on by default when it's active so that it can be styled. And in terms of like accessibility, things like ARIA current is added, which increases like the ease of making things accessible, since anyone with excessive or assistive tech will be told that, hey, this is the page you're on right now. So there's some really some helpful default things that are added on that an anchor tag won't have.
Sweet. Thank you.
Yep. Sorry, Ray.
no worries. I didn't see the Shane question. Sorry about it.
Cool. All right, I'll go ahead and take over now. We're gonna discuss our learning modules from this week. So let me pull up our project brief and share my screen. If y'all can't hear me at any point, let me know, because I just got a little notification that my headset is dying, so I'm charging it, but interrupt me if you can't hear me. All right, let me share my screen and make sure I'm sharing the right desktop. All right. Okay, so this week we had quite a slew of learning modules. We kind of just want to, get you started with all the foundations that you're going to need for the next couple months. And so there's quite a few. If you look in the future, generally, I think always, we're just going to have one learning module for each week. But this week, we just had quite a few of the foundational topics that we wanted to discuss. So we talked about Git, code review, communication, pair programming, and agile. We can start from the top and work our way down. I kind of wanted to see if there were any topics that y'all thought were particularly interesting or confusing that we maybe wanted to start with. If not, we can start from the top. But were there any topics that you wanted to discuss a little bit more than any of the others? My chat open. All right. If we don't have any preferences, then we can start at the top. Git is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to open up the slides just so that we remember what they were, since I know there was a lot. So Git, how did we feel about using Git this week? Were the commands that you had to use pretty familiar, or did you have to kind of get used to some different ones since you were branching and pair programming and creating PRs?
I think for, for us, it was pretty familiar with some of them, but using these docs definitely helped with like a refresh, and I did learn a little bit more. Like I learned a new way to like name a branch through these slides. I previously had just used like a different method without the B flag here, so it was like get branch, name the new branch, and then get check out that branch to transition to that branch. Whereas with this one, you can both name and transition to that new branch. So that was something new that I learned from this slide.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I feel like Git updates. There are Git updates over time, and so some of us we learn a command and we just like commit it to memory. But learning some of these different hacks can be really useful. And that's another thing I really love about pair programming or watching other people code is everyone has like a slightly different way of doing things. And it can be, useful to see that. So yeah, thanks. Anyone else? What was your experience like with Git? How do we feel about Git? Are we scared of it? Do we like it? Is it our friend? Is it both? Frenemy?
I think it's a bit of both. I liked it, and I think it was nice to have a refresh on an issue that was fairly straightforward and simple without too many changes needed as of right now.
Yeah. I think we might have talked about this during office hour, but I know if you're anything like me, the concept of a Git conflict is terrifying. And so we want to, that's totally valid. But I think it's also something to be excited about in our team. If we have a Git conflict, that's a really good learning opportunity, working through it and seeing how it works. So if you run into any of those, feel free to throw out the bat signal and we can all, work together and I think we'll all feel good for having seen it, even if it's not directly a conflict that we're facing, just so that we can work through it together. So totally fair if it's a little daunting for you, but it is there to help you. So try not to be scared of it. Learning a lot about Git is really, really beneficial for, it can save you a lot of time rather than having to nuke something and start over. It's like that's why Git is there, so that you can kind of backtrack and fix things. So cool. Any other thoughts about Git? I think we've got some meatier topics, so we can surely move along if there's no questions. Definitely check out some of these resources if you're feeling confused about Git and want to familiarize yourself a little bit more. They're linked in the slides. I might also just add these to our project brief so that they're easier to find for you. But yeah, great resources here. So let's move along to code review.
Oh, I was
Same
gonna
question.
just
Go
something
ahead.
real. It like so I've been using it for a decent amount of time now, but it's got this weird vibe of like it's a tool so you don't lose your work, but as you use it, it feels like you can destroy your work, which is a very odd vibe. But from what I understand, it's like it's actually kind of hard to destroy everything with Git. It's like you can usually revert back to something that exists on your repo. So I try to remind myself of that where it's I've been in like projects that it's just like I thought I destroyed everything, but really you just have to find like the hash code for that branch and then just reverse it, sort of a thing.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but it's nerve-wracking all the same.
It is. And I think maybe it has that vibe because a lot of people, we don't really fully understand how Git works. It feels like magic and it's like so it can just destroy everything, but its purpose is the opposite of that, is to help you, be able to have a really clear record of all of your work. So I think learning more about it also just makes it less scary because you understand that that's not why it's there. It's there to help you. So yeah, that's a really good point, Shane. Oh dear, move these controls. All right, so let's take a look at code review. I know this was at least for some of us, the first time we've had to do code review, and it can be a little confusing, like how to do it exactly. But what was the experience like doing code reviews this week? Did this documentation help you, or the video help you in knowing how to approach code review?
I think for myself, I wish I had actually looked through that before doing my code review. Then I would have probably immediately hit the approve button and been like, all right, here's just my comments, but it's approved so that you can go ahead and get it merged whenever you're done. I think that was my big takeaway from it.
Yeah, no worries, Andrea. We had some conversation on Slack about this, but it's really, I do it kind of often where I intend to approve something, but I leave a comment because I think the default setting is to just comment instead of approve. So no worries. If that ever happens for anyone else on the team, even if you've already reviewed a PR, you can always go back to the same. Can I show you if we don't have an open PR? If you open a PR, you can always go to the Files Changed tab, and then, oh, I can still review even a merged PR, and then just come in here and you can, I guess I can't review it, or I can't approve it because it's already been merged, but you can always go through the same process and you don't have to like re-request a review or anything like that. So yeah. Anything else about like anything that was surprising to you or questions you had about this learning module?
I was gonna say that I think this first week I felt like I didn't know exactly what the expectations were, or like how much to comment, how much to like, sort of throw the ball back and forth, so to speak, on these things. But I'm looking forward to like finding out what works for us as a group, and sort of like, yeah, I like the asynchronous nature of code reviews because I mean we're all very busy people and life is chaotic, sort of a thing. So I'm looking forward to see like how we get more discussion on things as things get more complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I think this week, yeah, as the issues get more complex and there's more of like you're having to make more decisions along the way, there might be more opportunities for people to ask questions of, oh, why did you do it this way instead of this way? Or, like there will be more opportunities for that back and forth. But yeah. Any other
Sorry, I
thoughts?
have so much to say today.
Yeah, no, I love it. This is a discussion session, so that's perfect.
What I really liked about the code review presentation too was reminding us that the code review process is also for like noticing what other people are doing well. I think a lot of the times in my head at least, I'm like, oh, I have to stick to like exactly the technical stuff rather than recognizing someone for working through a project or working through like a tough spot and maybe like the elegant code that they've come up with. So that was a really good reminder.
Yeah, I think that's a good lesson to bring forward with you because you're not the only one that it feels like when you're doing a code review, you're like taking a red pen to someone's work and you need to just like point out what's wrong. A lot of people just that's just kind of the natural way of approaching it. So coming in and pointing out things that someone does well is a really good way of just encouraging that behavior to continue. So yeah, I really love that point.
I want to add
Um,
something. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh,
No, go ahead.
yeah, so maybe for my experience about code review, because if you see someone codes, maybe in the future you will get that code also. So it's kind of like learning earlier. So in the future, if you need to touch that code, you already understand what it's doing. So it's not a beneficial of code review for me.
yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. Davina,
I
what were you
think
going to say?
I think this kind of ties in a little bit with the presentation that you did on communication. But like I think that having a team do code reviews is kind of like you said that like avoiding the monopoly of institutional knowledge. So like everyone kind of understands how the code works. So that way something happens, everyone is able to go in and look and understand what's happening there. So I think code reviews also help with that a little bit.
For sure. You want to make sure that when there's changes made to the code, everyone is kind of aware of it or has a way of finding out about it. When you work on a bigger team, you might not necessarily review every single code, like every single PR that gets put up there, but you at least have a way of following the path. Like if there's a line of code that you don't understand, you can kind of use git blame. If you're not familiar with that, it's like a way of seeing who made a commit and maybe like what PR introduced the commit, and you can just kind of follow the breadcrumbs to get more context about what's going on. So yeah, it's a really good form of documentation for sure. That's a great point, Davina. I also personally really like opening PRs and making them very like have lots of context for myself, just like because I have a terrible memory. So just like making sure that I can using some of these tips, just like having screenshots of like what changed in this PR so that when I go back, like, what did I do in this PR again? Like, oh yeah, I added links. I made nav links on this PR. And so it's just really easy to understand. And also just double check your work too of like, okay, this is what I am saying happens in this PR. Is that what's happening in this PR? Just it's a good way of double checking that you've met the AC, the acceptance criteria for your issue. So yeah, love PRs, love very descriptive PRs. That's like that's a hill that I will die on, that you need to add context to your PRs. Not everyone is as passionate about this as the Collab Lab, so, but I am. Cool. Any other thoughts about PRs or code reviews? Let's see. Shane says the term nit is commonly used for sort of nitpicky changes. If you even have a minor things to mention that you are aware of could wait or aren't the main priority of PR, just in case you all see it in the wild. Yeah, this is a good point, Shane. Actually, something that I don't know if this was mentioned in what is it called? Commit. I'll have to find the link. I can't remember what it's called. There's like a really good way of leaving code review is it in the darn, it's not in here. Something that I like to do along the lines of what Shane was saying is that when you're commenting on a PR, adding a little like some kind of like little code word so that people know like, okay, this is something that they're just kind of being nitpicky and it's okay if I include it, but it's okay if I skip it, versus like you could say something like suggestion, so that they understand, or you could say something like praise. It just is a little cue to let the person receiving the code review understand, like have context into what you're saying so they can like, okay, this is praise. I'm going to skip that because I'm really busy. I'll come back and look at that later. So adding some of those keywords. What is that? Lewis or Ray, do you remember? Are you
Is it
familiar with this?
conventional commits?
Yes, thank you. Or conventional comments, yeah. Thank you. So there's this concept called conventional comments.
Oh, conventional
I
comments.
can
I
conventional
found
commits as well,
use,
yeah.
Yeah, I use conventional commits at work, not conventional comments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, they're similar concepts, but these are good ways of just helping people to get context about what you're doing. So I just sent that in the chat. But that's a really nice way of, it's just like a shared language among your team so they understand what's going on. Cool. Let's move along. Any other thoughts about code reviews that we wanted to get out there? I'm loving all these comments from everyone. They're really helpful. All right, let's look at communication for devs. Any takeaways from this learning module or anything? We talked about documentation, pull requests, comments, and code. did you all have any, I guess we just talked about pull requests when we were talking about code review, but how about documentation or comments? Did you guys have much of a chance to use either of those this week?
I had a quick question about that. I guess we're sort of just figuring out what we need as a team and how to communicate, sort of a thing. I guess my question is are we trying to adopt a standard where we do not have comments in our work all the way up to a merge to main, sort of like remove new comments as we are like making it the new production version of our app? Or are some comments are okay? I can see the value either way. I'm just kind of sort of curious if there's like a standard we already want.
Yeah, that's a good question. Others feel free to jump in. What I would say is intentional, like if there is an intentional reason that we're having a comment in the code, for example, right now there are a lot of comments in the code of, oh, this is what this specific hook does. This is where you can find more information about it. You know, that's very intentional. I know this week some of the comments were to-do comments of render a list right here. And once you all rendered it, you went ahead and deleted that comment because it's no longer helpful or relevant to the code, which is exactly what I would encourage you to do in that situation. So I think just thinking about, you know, is there a use for this comment now? Is there not? Is it something I am guilty all the time of accidentally committing comments that it's just I was temporarily undoing a line and I forgot to uncomment it out. So if it's an intentional reason to keep it in, then that's great. You might leave a comment in, open a PR, and have someone comment like, should we remove this? And if your answer is, oh, I intentionally left this in for this reason, you can totally have back and forth. It's definitely, I would say there's not like a prescriptive answer to that. It can be a conversation with the team. Does that answer your question?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think Lewis just said something in chat saying a good comment to add in the near future might be what exactly does that data look like as we're getting it back from Firebase. So we can not have to console log it all over the place.
Yeah. I love that suggestion. Cool. Any other thoughts about communication as a general topic?
Oh, something I wanted to add. From what little experience I've got in groups, all of the issues I've ever had come from sort of not assuming positive intent, sort of a thing with working with others, with like getting criticism and stuff like that. So much of it comes down to they're probably not trying to upset you or do anything against you. So it's like if you assume positive intent in general, it really helps when reading text on the screen remotely, but like the mood and just like the feeling of it, sort of a thing.
For sure. I think that's why I think somewhere in some documentation, I think maybe in the orientation, there was a recommendation to use lots of emojis and lots of GIFs, which the first time I heard that at the Collab Lab felt a little counterintuitive to me because I've always kind of been taught that that's not professional, something like that. But I have totally been converted and I am on a mission at work to just make everyone use the emojis all the time because especially when you're communicating asynchronously, it is really easy to read something and be like, oh, this person's so mad at me or something. And it's like, they're just not really, it's just text and it's hard to convey emotion. So using some of those images can help to convey that positive intent so that people can understand better. So definitely agree that assuming positive intent as much as possible can help avoid some conflict, but also using some of those tools to help convey that positive intent to others can be really helpful as well. Also, along those lines, I think just when you're communicating asynchronously, over communicating is better than under communicating. If you're like, I don't know, if you're just not feeling great, one day, just being like, hey, I'm feeling kind of sick. It can help someone to contextualize, oh, this is maybe why this person is not being super chatty right now. Like just, you know, whatever you're comfortable with. But I think just over communicating, oh, this is something that I'm dealing with right now can be really helpful for especially for working in like an async type environment, a distributed environment.
I will kind of piggyback off of what Shane said for the code review that I did. Like I kind of agonized over my wording for like, do you think the console logs will be helpful when we're like working with the API later on? Like I meant it completely like genuinely curious, and I had no idea how to convey that without making it seem like a passive aggressive, like, are you sure it'll be like useful?
Yeah.
And so I think probably using some emojis would help with that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I am very much pro emoji everywhere. Because for the same reason, I agonize over like, is that too many exclamation points? Or like, is that like not enough? Do they think I hate them? And it's really easy to get really in your head when you're not speaking face to face. So, yeah, it goes both ways. Like try and convey that positive intent using whatever tools you have, but also just give people the benefit of the doubt that, we're all here on a team and we're all here to help each other. I think sometimes people don't have positive intent. You don't know that, but honestly, for my own mental health, I would rather assume people do have positive intent and are not out to get me. So I think that's just a good way of framing it for yourself. Yeah, Shane, same. If I use a lot of exclamation points, it's definitely something that I agonize over. Cool. All right, let's chat. Oh, we've got 10 minutes left. So we've got 2 more slides to get through and like probably wrap up in the next few-ish minutes. So we can definitely chat async if we have additional questions, but we've got pair programming, and then we're also going to chat about Agile. Pair programming, what was that like? Was this anyone's first time pair programming this week?
Yeah, it
Yeah?
was my first time.
Does it count if I had a disastrous pair programming interview as my first time?
Oh no, that's awful. That is
Yeah.
that is a terrible way to have a
Yeah.
first pair programming. Sorry to hear that.
All
We
right.
will not count that. We'll say that this was your first time. Cool. So how was it? Was it very weird to get used to programming with another person? Did you pick up little tips from your partner, just like how they program?
I think like it's definitely going to be like a little bit of a skill to learn because I feel like I often get so like it felt a little bit challenging for me to like both like think through what code should be to write and also be talking at the same time.
For sure.
Yeah. But it also is very helpful at the same time. It's very helpful to like, for example, with Shane, like going back and forth and like doing the debugging and trying to figure out what the problem was that we were getting into. Because I have found before that if I'm stuck on something, like explaining the problem to somebody else often will lead me to figure out the solution to it just from like explaining what the issue is to somebody. So I think it would be good. It's good for both explaining your thought process and probably for like coming up with solutions to like issues or problems that you're stuck on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was probably very beneficial to you both to have a kind of challenging issue you needed to debug and doing that as a pair and having someone to bounce ideas off of. Yeah, I'm glad that you got that experience, Emily, during your first pair programming experience. So that's great. Any other thoughts about pair programming?
I was just going to chime in and say, struggling in that moment with Emily made it so we could sort of confirm reality for one another in such a useful way, where it's just like, no, that looks like a string. Is that a string? And it's like, ah, that still looks like a string. To me, it's a string. Is that a string to you? She's like, yeah, that's a string. It's like, well, we want it to be an object, right? Because we're trying to access this thing in it. It's like, by just confirming what we're seeing with our eyes, it makes it like you save so much more time when you're focused on the right thing going wrong, so to speak.
For sure. When you're debugging, sometimes you can just kind of feel like you're losing your mind. Like, I don't know what words are anymore. Like, what is happening? So yeah, just having someone else also just in the trenches with you, moral support. This is difficult, isn't it? Like, yeah, it is. I'm not missing something obvious here. Yeah. Any other comments, thoughts, questions?
I think that when you are pair programming and you have someone who's kind of watching you type and watching you code, it can be easy to like feel anxious in that moment. I definitely make way more spelling mistakes and way more obvious mistakes when there's somebody watching my code. So it's nice to have someone there who's just like, oh, did you mean to capitalize that letter? Like, like, oh, I think that might result in a reference error, like small things that you just happen to overlook because someone's there watching you, but then they're also there to help you catch those things was kind of nice to have.
Yeah. I like that point. Pair programming is great, but there is a little bit of a cost to it of you do feel like you're performing a little bit for someone else, and it is a little bit more stressful in that way, which is probably also a good reason to do it more so that when you're in an interview setting, it's a little bit more familiar, having someone watching you and being familiar with talking through your thought process. But there is a little bit more of a performance aspect to it that way. So definitely. Yes. Yeah. Having someone there to watch you is definitely helpful. That's great. Cool. All right, let's quickly then just chat about Agile before I pass it to Lewis to talk about our issues this week. Agile, we're doing it. Any questions about it? I think what I'm going to do, because I just want to make sure we have time to talk through the issues. Oh, Emily, were you about to say something? Did I cut you off? Okay. I think what I'll do is I'm just going to start a thread on our Slack channel and we can discuss Agile a little bit more in detail. I just want to make sure we have time to talk through our issues this week. Oh no, now I can't find how to stop sharing. Oh, there we go. I'm going to stop sharing and let Lewis talk through the issues. But I would like to talk more about Agile with you all if you have any questions. So I'm going to pass it to Lewis to talk about our issues.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So for this week, I just want to show the pairings. For this week will be Emily and Andrea. I'm not sure if this is actually assigned. I think we can pick which issue you guys want to work on, but we'll be doing issues 4 and 5, and then the other team is Shane and Davina. So we go to issue number 4. So issue number 4 is, as a user, I want to set up a new shopping list so I can start tracking purchased items. So this is going to be done mostly on the home page. We're going to need to, we're going to be creating a form that allows users to create a shopping list on the homepage. And when the shopping list is created, you're going to need to save a token to local storage, as well as save the list to the database using the create list function, which is already built. And then you need to show the user the list view once it's created. So the acceptance criteria, there's 2 sets. The UI one is the homepage will have a form. The input will be the name of the list and will have a semantic label associated with it. The user can submit this form with both the mouse and the enter key. So that means you probably need a submit button. And then when the user submits the form, they see a message indicating that the list was either created or not. So some sort of success message or response message. For the data related tasks, submitting the form with the create list function, which I mentioned in the Firebase file. The shopping list path of the new list is going to be stored in local storage using that set list path function, which I think was mentioned earlier today as well. And once it's created and saved, you're redirected to the list view. And there's some information here in the notes on how the create list function, the set list function works. And if you do get stuck with redirecting, you can take a look at the React Router docs for how to use navigate. Issue number 5 will be adding items to a shopping list. So as a user, I want to add a new item to my shopping list so I can start recording purchases. So for this one, the add item view should present them with a form as well. It allows them to enter 2 things. First is the name of the item, and the next one is an estimate on when they think they'll need to buy the item again. There's a README here that you can use to learn more about the shopping list API. So the manage list view, this will be the 3rd page in the app. It'll have a form that allows them to enter name, and there'll be a drop down or a radio or something to select one of the 3 choices, which is soon, kind of soon, or not soon. So soon will be 7 days, kind of soon is 14, and not soon is 30 days. The input will also be another text field with an associated label. And you should also be able to submit the form with both a mouse key, or mouse, or the enter key using the submit button or pressing enter. And there should also be some sort of response message here to let them know whether or not it was saved to the database. There's a console log in the add item function in Firebase, which will need to be replaced. So it's not completely finished the add item function. So you'll see a console log in there that you'll need to replace with a function that adds new items to the database. And that's going to be from the Firestore module. So you might need to take a look at the Firestore docs if you have questions about how to add items to the database. And the soon, not soon, kind of soon is used to calculate the next purchase date, which I'm not sure we'll be using yet, but that's what's going to be used for in the future. Does anyone have any questions on how these 2 issues work?
I think I understand generally the scope of it, but are you aware of any like overlap between these 2 issues with like where we'll be working in the code base? Is there like a likelihood for a conflict?
I don't think so, because one is related to the homepage and creating lists. The other one's related to adding items to lists. And since you guys already set up a default list, this issue can use that default list. So you don't need to be able to create lists in order to do this.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. If there's no other questions, does any particular pair have an interest in doing one or the other? If not, we'll just stick with issue 4 and 5 as this.
Cool. Sounds good.
Bye.
All right. All right, team. So Lewis will be reaching out about office hours this week. And yeah, reach out on Slack if you come up with any questions you didn't think of on this call. And we'll see you later. Have a good week, everyone.
Have a good week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, all.
Bye-bye.